so far we've been looking at collisions, and we've just been looking at the changes in velocity that occur when objects collide, or when objects explode, or when objects, I guess, just interact. But if you've got a change in velocity, you've necessarily got acceleration or deceleration, and that means there's a force that's acting on those objects. And whereas in those momentum equations, we're really thinking about the whole system, we're thinking about two objects. For this part of the course, and we think about impulse, we're actually considering what's happening just to one of those objects generally. So we're looking at what's causing that change in momentum, and how to quantify that. So we've got here on this slide, we've got an example of a collision. We're going to have a think about the forces that were involved in that, and how we can do some maths to work that out. So when there's a change in momentum, basically it means that there's a force that's been acting over a period of time. So it's usually a very small period of time, but nonetheless it's a period of time. And we're going to call that impulse I. Okay, so it's a italic I. And it just equals the change in momentum. So we can measure that by just working out the momentum before and after. So you already know how to do that, so that's great. Now, we can then equate this to forces, or we can then bring forces into it by thinking about how force is equal to mass times acceleration, and we know that momentum is mass times velocity, and there's obviously a relationship there between velocity and acceleration. So acceleration is just velocity on time, which basically means that we can rearrange those equations and we get our impulse, or change in momentum. It does equal mass times change in velocity, but also then equals force times change in time. So basically, if you have a force acting on an object, for example, an egg, and it occurs over a certain period of time, so that would be the time of impact, not the whole time for the object to get to that impact, to that, like to fall, but the actual, it's the time that the force is acting on that object. So if we multiply that force by the change in time, we're going to be getting our impulse, and that's the same as the mass times the velocity, which is kind of cool. Okay, so impulses are vector quantities, just like momentum was, and the units for this are Newton seconds. So that's from our force times time equation. And there's a bit of a tricky thing with the units here. So I want you to have a think about, is there another unit you could use for this?